This segment is about fair housing, assistive animals, and dealing with other accommodation and modification requests. This is kind of an awkward topic. Many people feel like they shouldn't have to let tenants have animals in their home. Let me explain to you the intent of fair housing when it's dealing with disabilities and why sometimes you have to, okay? Somebody who is blind, who may not like animals, but needs a seeing eye dog, our society feels should not be discriminated against or treated differently because of her blindness or other disability. And so we've passed the Fair Housing Act, which says that if somebody with a disability asks for a reasonable accommodation, that they get to have that reasonable accommodation. So let's go to what an accommodation is. A reasonable accommodation is a change in a rule or policy. It generally doesn't cost you money, but it's a change in a policy. So for instance, somebody comes and says, I am blind, I need the seeing eye dog. And you say, wait a second, I have a no pets policy. What they are really asking you is that you change your policy to allow them to have an accommodation for being in a protected class, which is they're disabled. Okay? We're going to talk in the next video about a form that you use called the Reasonable Accommodation request form, anytime anybody asks you for an accommodation. But for right now, they are asking for a change of the policy, which is an accommodation, and under federal law, you have to grant it. Now, I'm not trying to scare you, but I know of landlords that had to allow tenants to have chickens and pigs, and in New York State, they're testing service horses. And here's the deal. As horrifying as that sounds, that you have to allow someone to have one of those in your apartment, you don't have to allow them to damage your apartment. In fact, they're responsible for any damages that they do. But look at it this way. Would you deny someone who's in a wheelchair? Would you deny someone who had crutches? Would you deny someone who has glasses? Those are tools to help them adapt to life with their disability, and so is a service or an assistive animal. So we'll get back to that in a second. What are some other accommodations people ask for? Well, people ask for closer parking spaces. Do you have to give them to them? Yes, in some cases you do. If they can demonstrate that because of a disability they need a closer parking space, you probably need to give it to them. There's others, but those are the most common. Now, let's talk about what a modification is. Modifications are confusing to people, but a modification is a change in the physical structure. Okay? That means if I'm in a wheelchair and I say, you know what, those steps make it impossible for me to get up to the door, can I build a ramp? You also must grant a modification. But the difference of the modification is, the modification is at the tenant's expense. So you would say, sure, let's get 3 bids, let's get licensed contractors, let's get city approval, the permit process, and then as soon as you pay up front for the cost, we will engage the contractor to build the ramp or grab bars or lift, or sometimes people need doorways widened or hallways changed or countertops lowered or the cabinet under the sink moved out so they can roll their wheelchair in and peel their carrots and wash their hands. So modifications and accommodations are things that you do have to give a tenant if they request it. One thing that I want to add that is a really commonly asked question is, if somebody asks for an accommodation or modification, can I charge them more for it? And so here's how I would frame that for you. If you had a policy that said white people have a deposit of $1,000 and Asian people have a deposit of $1,500, everybody would understand that and take that as discriminatory. If you have a policy that says able-bodied people who don't have disabilities pay a $1,000 deposit, but someone who needs a service animal pays a $1,500 deposit or pays $50 extra rent or anything like that, everybody would perceive that as well as discriminatory. So no fees, no extra deposits, no additional charges based on requesting an accommodation or an accommodation modification you can make them pay for up front, but not on an ongoing basis. Now, in the next video, we're going to talk about using the accommodation request form. At the bottom of the screen is HUD's helpline number. Michelle Hutchins is the Utah representative, or the Apartment Association can answer any specific questions. Thank you.